I want you to picture a specific moment. Maybe it was even this morning. You're in the car, you're late for a huge presentation, the kind that could make or break your quarter.
Yeah.
And traffic just stops.
Dead stop.
Dead stop. And you can see the red taillights just stretching out for miles. Physiologically, what happens in that split second? Your heart rate spikes, your stomach drops,
Gripping the wheel?
your knuckles are white, you are physically trying to push the car forward with your mind.
It's the illusion of agency, right?
Mm.
We think if we just tense up enough, if we worry hard enough, we can somehow bend reality to our will.
Exactly. And that tension, that white knuckling, is exactly what we're going to talk about today. We're doing a deep dive into a blog post that just dropped today, February 17th, 2026, by Jimmy Perez.
And it's titled Surrendering.
It is. Now, I know what you're thinking. Surrender sounds like losing. It sounds like giving up. It sounds weak.
And that's usually where people tune out. I mean, in our culture, surrender is basically a dirty word. It implies the other guy won. It implies failure. But what Perez is arguing here, and this is what makes the piece so fascinating, is that we have the definition completely wrong. He's framing surrender not as, a passive defeat, but as a highly active, almost high-performance state of being.
He calls it a graceful alignment with a greater power, which, I have to admit, sounds a lot more appealing and a lot more effective than just waving the white flag.
It does.
Yeah.
But getting there, that's where the work is. Because Perez doesn't pretend this is easy. He describes our internal state not as some peaceful garden, but as a wrestling mat.
A constant grapple.
Yeah, a constant low-grade grapple between two very specific forces that live inside all of us.
Okay, so let's break that down. Who are the combatants in this wrestling match?
So in the red corner, you've got the ego, he sometimes calls the flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And in the blue corner, you have the true self, or the divine within.
The ego versus the true self. It sounds a little abstract. How does Perez actually distinguish between them? I feel like I hear ego used to mean everything from just arrogance to some complex Freudian thing.
That's a really great point. And Perez gets specific. He says the ego is the part of us that is obsessed with control because it is fundamentally driven by fear.
Okay.
The ego needs to know the ending of the movie before the opening credits are even done. It treats uncertainty as a threat to its very survival.
So when I'm refreshing my email every 10 seconds, waiting for a reply, or checking the stock market app 5 times an hour, that's the ego.
Precisely. That's the ego trying to micromanage the timeline of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
It thinks, if I just stare at this hard enough, I can control the outcome.
Right.
On the other side, Perez defines the true self as the part of us connected to something larger, the soul, the Holy Spirit, God.
Yeah.
He even references Luke 17:21, the kingdom of God is within you.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that this true self operates on trust. It doesn't need to control all the external variables because it's anchored internally.
But Perez points out something really tricky here. It's not always obvious when the ego is running the show. He talks about the sneaky ego.
This was one of the most insightful parts of the post for me.
Yeah.
The sneaky ego is when you think you're surrendering, but you're actually just performing surrender to get what you want.
It's transactional.
Exactly. It's saying, okay, God, I surrender to your will, so can I have that promotion now?
Right. Or, I've let go of my anxiety, so why hasn't the problem been fixed yet?
Yes. I've let go, so where's my result? Perez writes, deep down, I sense it is my ego pretending to let go while still holding the reins.
Wow.
It's the form of, spiritual bypassing. We use the language of surrender as just another tool to try and manipulate the outcome. True surrender, he argues, isn't a negotiation.
So that brings us to the core paradox of this whole piece. And honestly, this is where I think most people get stuck. We've got this true self that wants to trust and this ego that wants to control. But we live in a world with deadlines and bills.
And responsibility.
And responsibilities. We can't just sit on a meditation cushion and hope the rent gets paid.
No, and Perez is very, very clear about that. He introduces a maxim here that I think every listener should just stick on their bathroom mirror. He says, work as though there is no God, but pray as though God is everything.
Whoa, hold on. Work as though there is no God. That sounds sounds atheist, or at least very secular for a piece about divinity.
It does sound jarring at first, doesn't it? But let's unpack it. Work as though there is no God means taking full ownership of your agency. It means honoring the gifts you've been given, your brain, your work ethic, your judgment.
Okay.
You don't sit back and wait for a miracle to finish your spreadsheet. You don't wait for divine intervention to have that hard conversation. You do the work.
So you take total responsibility for the input.
Exactly. You own the input. That's the first part. But then the second half, pray as though God is everything. That is about the outcome. Once you have done the work, once you have sent the email or planted the seed, the result is wildly out of your hands.
It's decoupling the labor from the anxiety of the result.
That is it. That is the key takeaway right there.
Yeah.
Effort prepares the way. Surrender allows the result. If you try to control the result, you're playing God. If you refuse to do the work, you're just being lazy. The sweet spot is right in the middle.
To visualize this, Perez uses a metaphor that I think is just brilliant. It really anchors the whole idea. He compares this state of active surrender to surfing.
It's the perfect visual. I mean, think about the physics of the ocean. The ocean is this immense, uncontrollable power. Life, the universe, whatever you want to call it, it's huge. And you are tiny.
And if you try to control the ocean, if you try to force a wave to break where you want it to,
You lose
Yeah.
every single time. The ocean does not care about your agenda. It doesn't care about your timeline. So control is impossible. But, and this is the key, passive surrender is also fatal.
Right. If you just lie there on the board and say, okay, I surrender, take me where you will, you're going to get smashed against the rocks. You're going to drown. You can't just be limp.
Exactly. Perez writes, if we simply stand there doing nothing, the waves will overwhelm us. So what does the surfer do? The surfer is hyperactive. They are constantly shifting their weight, reading the water, paddling hard to catch the momentum.
They're doing a ton of work. They are not just chilling.
A ton of work. But here's the thing. They aren't generating the wave. They're aligning with the energy that is already there. They are, quote, moving with it moment by moment.
I love that distinction. You're riding the energy of the situation rather than trying to, like, build a dam against it.
And think about the sneaky ego again in this context. The ego wants to build a dam. The ego wants to stop the wave or freeze it so it feels safe. The surfer, the true self, knows that the only stability comes from moving with the chaos.
And Perez doesn't just stop at surfing. He layers in a few other analogies to really cement this. One of them is the sailor.
The sailor, yeah, it works in a similar way. You can have the best boat, the best charts, the best crew. That's your work. But you cannot manufacture wind.
If the wind dies, it dies. You're just
Yeah.
stuck.
And if a storm rolls in, you can't shout it away. You have to reef the sails. You adjust your rudder. The sailor is in a constant dialogue with the elements, but is never the master of them. It's about adaptation, not domination.
Then he brings in the farmer. And this one really hit home for me. It feels so applicable to, projects or businesses or even parenting.
Oh, absolutely. The farmer represents the long game. The farmer can till the soil, fertilize, water, keep pests away. That is a lot of sweat equity. But the actual moment of growth, the spark of life inside that seed,
Farmer can't touch that.
no. And you cannot reach into the dirt and pull the sprout up faster. If you do, what
You
happens?
kill it. You ruin the whole harvest.
Right. You have to trust the process. You have to surrender to the timeline of nature. You do everything you can to create the conditions for success, but you can't force the success itself.
And his final example, which is maybe the most relatable human experience of all, is sleep.
The ultimate paradox of control.
I mean, we've all been there. It's 2 a.m., you have a big day tomorrow, and you tell yourself, I need to sleep now. You command it. Sleep, damn it.
And what happens?
You wake up even more, your heart starts racing, you start doing the math on how many hours you have left.
Because sleep is an act of surrender. You cannot do sleep. You can only set the conditions for it. You can, buy the nice mattress, darken the room. That's the work. But then you have to let go. The harder you try to grab sleep, the faster it runs away.
It just keeps reinforcing that formula. Effort prepares the way, surrender allows the result.
It's consistent across every domain.
Yeah.
Surfing, farming, sailing, sleeping. The mechanism is identical. Control kills the flow, surrender allows it.
Okay, so intellectually I'm with you. This all makes sense. The metaphors are solid, but let's get practical. Because when I'm in a heated meeting or I'm dealing with a family crisis, I do not feel like a surfer. I feel panic.
You feel the ego screaming.
Yes. And Perez acknowledges this is hard.
He does. He asks the crucial question. How do we actually tell the difference between the fearful ego and their true self in the heat of the moment? Because the ego is loud. It mimics the voice of reason, but it's actually the voice of fear.
So what are the tools? How do we train ourselves to hear the true self when all that noise is so high?
Perez identifies two main tools, meditation and prayer. But he defines them in very specific, almost utilitarian ways.
Okay, let's start with meditation. A lot of people see meditation as just zoning out or, escaping reality. How does Perez frame it?
For Perez, meditation is about clarity. It's about letting the sediment settle so you can actually see the water. But he gives us a metric, a KPI for meditation, if you will, which I found really helpful.
A KPI for a spiritual practice. I like that. What is it?
He says, you know it's working when your behavior becomes more balanced and less reactive.
Reactivity. That is the key word.
Yes. If you're meditating for an hour a day, but you're still laying on your horn the second the light turns green, or snapping at your partner for a small mistake, the practice isn't translating. The goal is to move from reaction.
Which is the ego's knee-jerk defense.
Exactly, to response.
Reaction is automatic, response is chosen.
Precisely. The surfer responds to the wave. The person drowning reacts with panic. Meditation buys you that split second of space to choose the response. It lets you see the wave coming and decide how to shift your weight, rather than just getting knocked over.
And then there's prayer. Now, depending on your background, that word might trigger a lot of different things, but Perez is really careful to distinguish between what we might call shopping list prayer and something else.
Transformational prayer, maybe?
Yeah.
This goes right back to the sneaky ego. Shopping list prayer is, please give me this job, please make this person like me, please let my sports team win.
It's asking the universe to conform to your specific desires. Here's my plan, please rubber stamp it.
Which is just the ego trying to control the world again, but using God as the mechanism. Perez says effective prayer, the kind that helps surrender, is not about asking for specific outcomes. It's about seeking guidance and alignment.
Alignment with what is.
Right. You aren't praying for the ways to vanish. You're praying for the balance to ride it. You're acknowledging that you don't actually know what the best outcome is in the grand scheme of things.
That requires a lot of humility to say, I actually don't know what should happen here, but please help me navigate whatever does happen.
It does. And Perez connects this to the concept of yin and yang. These are complementary forces. Certainty and uncertainty, effort and release. You need both to be whole. If you only have effort or yang without release or yin, you just burn out. But if you only have release without effort, you stagnate.
So if we embrace this philosophy, if we start working as though there's no God, but praying as though God is everything, what's the payoff? Because Perez makes a pretty stark argument about the cost of not doing this.
He talks about the cost of control. And he doesn't mince words. He describes a life guided only by control as heavy, rigid, and exhausting.
Rigid is such an evocative word there.
Well, think about a rigid structure in an earthquake. It snaps, it breaks. A flexible structure, one that moves with the tremors, survives. Perez argues that the ego makes us brittle. We spend so much energy trying to prop up this illusion of control that when reality inevitably hits us, because reality always wins, we shatter.
He also makes a distinction between surviving and living well.
Right. You can white-knuckle your way through life. You can force outcomes, bully people, micromanage every detail. You might succeed on paper. You might survive. But you won't live well. You won't have peace.
On the flip side, he talks about the dignity of response. He writes, surrender does not mean abandoning responsibility. And I think this is so empowering for anyone who feels like surrender means being a doormat.
It's the opposite of being a doormat. Perez argues that even if circumstances are not your fault, even if the giant wave coming at you is unfair or the market crash wasn't your doing, it is still yours to respond to.
In that response lies our dignity and our freedom.
That's the Stoic idea, isn't it? You aren't free because you control the world. You're free because you control your inner alignment with it. And when you combine that accountability with the grace of surrender, Perez says life becomes navigable with grace and purpose.
You get to be flexible. You get to be trusting. You get to have peace, even when the storm is raging.
It's the difference between fighting the ocean and dancing with it.
So let's just recap the journey we've been on today. We started with that internal wrestle, the boxing match between the fearful ego and the trusting true self.
We identified that sneaky ego, which tries to use spiritual concepts to manipulate outcomes. The part of us that pretends to let go, but is secretly checking the tracking number on its desires.
We walked through the metaphors of active surrender. The surfer who moves with the wave, the sailor who adjusts the sails, the farmer who plants the seed but has to trust the harvest.
And we unpacked the tools. Meditation, to lower our reactivity, to find that gap between stimulus and response, and prayer, to align our will rather than just list our demands.
And ultimately, we looked at the choice. You can live a life of rigid, exhausting control, or you can choose the flexible, resilient path of surrender.
And that really changes how you make decisions. I mean, think about someone listening right now, maybe facing a tough choice at work or in a relationship. If you're operating from the ego, that decision is terrifying.
Because you feel like you're the god of that tiny universe. If you make the wrong move, the whole world ends.
It's a crushing amount of pressure. It's unsustainable. But if you operate as the surfer, the pressure just evaporates. You focus on your stance, you focus on your skills, you focus on the immediate action, and you let the ocean carry the weight of reality.
It allows you to breathe.
It allows you to actually live.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today, something to take with you into your next stressful moment. We've talked a lot about that surfing metaphor, and I want you to really visualize it the next time you feel that panic rising.
It's a powerful image to hold on to.
If you feel like you are drowning in a situation right now, if you feel overwhelmed and panicked, ask yourself this one hard question. Are you drowning because the ocean is rough? Or are you drowning because you are standing rigid on the board, refusing to move with the wave?
That's the question.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
See you next time.